together. And that is what drives the DA. And that is why we're not going to walk out on the GNU, we're not going to walk out on South Africa, and we're not going to walk out on the people who are looking to us to show the leadership that's required in this country to get it moving forward. However, we need to then genuinely focus on the things that are going to get our country moving forward. And that cannot be the ways of the past: corruption, maladministration, pilfering of public money, disrespect shown to Parliament, and all of these other things that have become simply par for the course over the last 20 years in South Africa. We need to change, and the GNU needs to lead that particular change. And so we will stay in the GNU as long as we believe we can be part of that change. However, we should not be tested to the point where we will have to make a decision. And that is why I've said we voted for the GNU and we voted for Mr. Ramaphosa because his public pronouncements were that he was committed to cleaning up government, to fighting against the corrupt, to implementing the findings of the state capture inquiry, to ensuring that those who are responsible for state capture are brought to justice and held accountable. And it is that distinguished him from the others in his party who belong to other factions. But the more he protects, the more he obfuscates, and the more that those who are guilty of new and fresh transgressions, as well as held unaccountable for past acts of omission and commission, remain unpunished or untouched, he becomes increasingly less distinguishable from that other faction. And that may well tip the scales in the future. But for now, we will continue to put the interests of South Africans first. However, we will be taking these steps in Parliament, and they are significant steps against these particular budgets. And we must not dismiss how important the government and the ANC regard this national dialogue. But again, I say to civil society, you need to play your role now in helping to help apply the pressure, and that this dialogue should not proceed until such time as those who are guilty of corruption and maladministration and those who have not lived up to the standards of the ministerial handbook and other are held accountable in the same way that Andrew Whitfield has been done. Lindsay, I saved your question because you were outside the room. I believe there are different scales of transgressions, and I believe that there are ways of dealing with different types of transgressions. Taking in South African Air Force plane and taking a bunch of ANC colleagues on a jolly when you're the Minister of Defence is an abuse of power in probably the most egregious way. Yet that warranted a 3-month salary dock and a public admonishment by the President. Andrew Whitfield, 10 days before the intended trip, wrote to the President. He requested an ability to travel, not for official travel. He travelled for a party function, as many ANC people travel for party functions regularly around the world, in order to meet with some of the people that we had been building a relationship with in the United States in order to ensure that we do not end up being kicked out of AGOA and ensure that South Africa's agenda remained firmly on the plate. There was no meetings at the White House or any of those, and there was no way Andrew Whitfield was going in an official capacity. He was there as a member of the DA. It was a party-funded trip. It was not paid for by government. And despite following up repeatedly for those days, he never got a response. To this day, he's never received a response. That is not only rude, it is unprofessional. And I noticed that Alvin Boertes this week thought he would be clever by publishing the fact that he wrote and the very next day got permission. Well, how is it that ANC deputy ministers write to the President for permission, they get an answer within 24 hours, but a DA minister, a deputy minister, has still not received an answer to that? Had the President written back and said no, I could quite clearly understand. I also recommended to the President in my interaction with him that perhaps there are other mechanisms that we could use, either a public admonishment, perhaps a docking of pay. I even said we would look at shuffling portfolios, which was the same remedy that was used for Minister Similani when her allegations around the VBS Bank originally broached. She was moved from justice to housing. I suggested perhaps we could, if there was a problem with him in that particular position, we could move him then. But there was an insistence that he now had to be fired. And I don't think it's fair that you try and earn tough guy credentials by going after a DA member when you're not prepared to be the tough guy and going after your own members who are breaking the Executive Ethics Code, the Executive Ethics Act, and who through acts of omission and commission cost the South African public a great deal in terms of money. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. Before I'm going to ask my colleague Karabo to close this meeting, I would just like to give a few words to our federal chairperson, Dr. Ivan Meyer.
All right, let's come out of those live proceedings there. In breaking news, as the DA has just announced that it will immediately withdraw from the National